I need to see this mower, Officer Rodriguez said with resignation, following Karen toward the property line like a man walking to his doom. Karen led the procession with the confidence of a prosecutor presenting evidence to a jury. She'd spent 3 years as HOA president building cases exactly like this one, turning neighborhood disputes into legal victories through sheer documentation and stubborn persistence. Here we are, she announced, pointing to Dave's riding mower with a telescoping pointer she'd apparently retrieved from her house. As you can see, the rear wheel is clearly encroaching on my property by approximately 2.3 inches. Dave threw his hands up. It's a lawn mower. It's not exactly parked. Property violations don't require intent, Mr. Mitchell. Karen replied smoothly. The HOA bylaws are quite clear on encroachment issues. Officer Rodriguez, I've prepared a measurement report. She handed the bewildered officer a laminated chart showing the mower's position relative to the property line, complete with photographs taken from multiple angles and what appeared to be trigonometric calculations. Officer Rodriguez studied the document, his expression growing more incredulous by the second. Mrs. Whitmore, did you create a mathematical proof about a lawnmower's position? Thoroughness prevents disputes, Karen said proudly. I believe in evidence-based community management. Meanwhile, Tyler and Mason had migrated to their backyard, where they were now using a garden hose to create what appeared to be a mud wrestling ring. The sound of their delighted shrieks carried across the neighborhood. Your kids are destroying your own yard now, Dave pointed out with grim satisfaction. Karen whipped around, her control momentarily slipping. Boys, what did I tell you about? No to now. She caught herself, smoothing her blazer and returning her attention to Officer Rodriguez. Children will be children, officer. The important thing is establishing accountability for this morning's incident. But Officer Rodriguez was now watching Tyler attempt to slide down their wooden deck railing while Mason cheered him on. Ma'am, it seems like your children might just be energetic. They're responding to the stress of living next to ongoing HOA violations, Karen said quickly, but her voice had lost some of its earlier conviction. Dave's negligent property maintenance has created an atmosphere of chaos in our formerly peaceful neighborhood. Dave laughed, actually laughed, for the first time all morning. Lady, you're blaming me for your kids being kids. Karen's jaw tightened. She could feel her carefully constructed narrative beginning to crack, but she'd come too far to back down now. Officer Rodriguez, I'm requesting that you document Mr. Mitchell's violations and issue appropriate citations. Our community depends on consistent enforcement of property standards. Officer Rodriguez looked at his watch, then at Karen's expectant face, then at the genuine disaster that was Dave's garden. Something in his expression shifted, and Karen recognized the look of a man who'd finally had enough. Mrs. Whitmore, he said slowly, I think we need to talk. Margaret Karen Whitmore stood frozen on her pristine front porch, her morning coffee mug suspended halfway to her lips, watching in absolute horror as her 8-year-old twin boys, Tyler and Mason, launched themselves off her neighbor's garden gnome like it was a medieval catapult. The ceramic dwarf's pointed hats snapped clean off as Tyler's sneaker connected with its head, sending rainbow-colored shards across Dave Mitchell's carefully manicured lawn. Boys, Karen shrieked, her voice reaching a pitch that sent 3 sparrows fleeing from her perfectly trimmed hedge. But it was too late. Mason had already grabbed Dave's prized garden hose and was spraying it directly into the man's open kitchen window, where Dave stood eating his breakfast in nothing but boxer shorts and a tank top. The situation escalated from disaster to catastrophe when Tyler, attempting to escape his mother's wrath, leaped over Dave's white picket fence and landed squarely in the middle of his prize-winning rose bush. The thorns caught his soccer uniform, and as he thrashed to free himself, he managed to uproot 3 months of careful cultivation. Karen's face cycled through several shades of red as she processed the scene. Her boys had just destroyed her neighbor's property, but instead of rushing to apologize, her HOA president instincts kicked in with a vengeance. She spotted Dave's lawnmower parked 2 inches over the property line into her yard, a violation she'd been documenting for weeks. Dave Mitchell, she bellowed, marching across the street with her phone already dialing. This is what happens when you can't respect property boundaries. Your negligent equipment storage has created a hazardous play environment. Dave emerged from his house, still dripping and clutching a dish towel, his eyes wide with disbelief. Are you serious right now? Your kids just destroyed my entire garden. I'm calling the authorities, Karen announced, her finger hovering over the final digit. Your lawnmower violation has created an attractive nuisance. This is clearly your fault. The absurdity of the moment hung in the air like morning fog. Tyler was still tangled in roses. Mason was soaking wet and holding the hose like a guilty confession, and Karen was somehow turning their destruction into Dave's legal liability. You're calling the cops? On me? Dave's voice cracked with incredulous laughter. Lady, your kids just turned my yard into a war zone. I'm documenting everything, Karen replied coolly, snapping photos of the carnage while simultaneously dialing 911. Hello, yes. I need to report a property violation that has resulted in child endangerment. As she spoke to the dispatcher, Karen's mind was already 3 steps ahead, calculating how she could spin this disaster into a victory. After all, she hadn't been HOA president for 3 years by backing down from a fight, even when her own children had started. Officer Rodriguez closed his citation book with a decisive snap that made Karen's stomach drop. In her 3 years as HOA president, she'd developed an almost supernatural ability to read people's intentions, and right now, she could see her carefully orchestrated morning crumbling like a house of cards. Mrs. Whitmore, I've been to this neighborhood 14 times in the past 2 months, Officer Rodriguez began, his tone shifting from professional patience to barely contained frustration. Every single call has been from you, about HOA violations that turned out to be interpretive. Karen felt heat rising in her cheeks. I take my community responsibilities seriously, officer. Property values depend on your neighbor's garbage can being 3 inches from the curb instead of directly on it doesn't constitute a public safety emergency, Rodriguez interrupted. Neither does someone's mailbox being an inch too tall, or their fence being painted eggshell instead of white. Dave's eyebrows shot up. Wait, you called the cops about my mailbox height? It's 4 inches above regulation. Karen protested, but even she could hear how ridiculous it sounded now. Officer Rodriguez pulled out his own folder. Apparently everyone in this neighborhood kept detailed records. Mrs. Whitmore, you've filed 17 complaints in 60 days. The department has spent approximately 43 hours investigating your reports. That's more than we spend on actual crime in this entire district. The weight of his words settled over the scene like a heavy blanket. Karen realized that Tyler and Mason had gone suspiciously quiet in the backyard, which usually meant they were either plotting something or had already executed it. Furthermore, Officer Rodriguez continued, I've noticed a pattern. These violations you report always seem to escalate into incidents that benefit your position as HOA president. The Hendersons moved away after your fence campaign. The Johnsons are considering selling after that pool dispute. Karen's mouth went dry. I'm simply enforcing community standards. You're harassing your neighbors out of the neighborhood, Dave said, the pieces finally clicking together. That's why the Kowalskis left too, isn't it? And the young family with the vegetable garden? People who can't follow rules shouldn't live in a covenant community, Karen said, but her voice lacked its earlier conviction. Officer Rodriguez stepped closer, his expression serious. Mrs. Whitmore, what I see here is a pattern of using law enforcement as your personal HOA enforcement tool. Your children damaged your neighbor's property, and instead of taking responsibility, you tried to manipulate the situation to avoid consequences. The truth hung in the air like a challenge. Karen felt something shift inside her chest, a crack in the armor of self-righteousness she'd been wearing for years. For just a moment, she saw herself through their eyes, a woman so obsessed with control that she'd weaponized her own children's misbehavior. I was just trying to, she started, then stopped. What was she trying to do? Protect the neighborhood, or protect herself from ever being wrong? A crash from the backyard interrupted her thoughts, followed by Tyler's voice. Mom, we may have accidentally broken the deck. Karen closed her eyes, feeling the last of her authority crumble around her. When she opened them again, both men were looking at her with something that might have been pity. "Go handle your kids, Karen," Dave said quietly. "We'll figure out the garden later." As she walked toward her backyard, Karen couldn't shake the feeling that something fundamental had just shifted, and she wasn't sure if she was ready for what came next. 20 minutes later, Officer Rodriguez pulled up to Maple Grove Lane with the weary expression of someone who'd been to this address 6 times in the past month. Karen stood waiting on her perfectly edged sidewalk, kitboard in hand, having somehow managed to transform from frazzled mother into HOA enforcement officer in record time. "Ma'am, you called about child endangerment?" Officer Rodriguez asked, stepping out of his patrol car. "Absolutely, officer. My neighbor's willful violation of HOA property line regulations created a hazardous condition that directly led to my children's injuries." Karen gestured toward Tyler, who was now sitting on her front steps with 3 band-aids on his arms, looking more annoyed than injured. Dave appeared from around his house, still surveying the destruction. His entire garden looked like a tornado had touched down specifically on his property. "Officer, those kids destroyed everything. Look at this mess." Karen smoothly intercepted, "Officer Rodriguez, yes, I remember you from the Henderson fence violation last month. What Mr. Mitchell isn't telling you is that his lawnmower has been illegally parked 2 inches over the property line for 17 days. I have documented evidence." She produced a thick folder with photographs, measurements, and what appeared to be a hand-drawn property survey. "As you can see, this creates an attractive nuisance that naturally draws children to play in unsafe proximity to his equipment." Officer Rodriguez rubbed his temples. In his 15 years on the force, he'd never encountered someone who could make their own children's misbehavior sound like a federal case. "Mrs. Whitmore, your kids damaged his property. The location of his lawnmower doesn't change that fact, but it establishes liability." Karen pressed on, pulling out her phone to show him a video. "I've been recording his violations for documentation purposes. This morning's incident was entirely predictable given his negligent storage practices." Dave's jaw dropped as he watched Karen's phone screen. She had apparently been filming his yard from her window for weeks, capturing time-stamped footage of his lawnmower's position at various times of day. "You've been spying on me?" Dave sputtered. "I've been protecting our community's property values through proper HOA oversight," Karen corrected. "And this footage clearly shows that your mower's position created the exact scenario that played out this morning." Officer Rodriguez looked from Karen's extensive documentation to the chaos in Dave's yard, then back to Karen's eerily calm demeanor. There was something unsettling about her preparedness, as if she'd been waiting for exactly this moment. "Mrs. Whitmore, even if his mower is slightly over the line, that doesn't give your children the right to destroy his garden." Karen's smile never wavered. "Officer, I think you'll find that HOA Covenant 47B clearly states that any property violation that creates a safety hazard shifts liability to the violating party. I have the county records right here if you'd like to review them." She produced another folder, this one containing what appeared to be legal documents. Dave stared in amazement. Who carried county records in their purse? "This is insane," Dave muttered, but Officer Rodriguez was already looking trapped between a rock and a very organized, very determined hard place.